This is for my fellow hunters!
3 years after skipping the portable gaming scene altogether for Monster Hunter World, the long-running franchise makes its comeback with a veritable monster parade on the Nintendo Switch with Monster Hunter Rise. It's both a return to form and marked departure for the franchise, which first started to truly gain steam in Japan after it got ported on the PlayStation Portable. The move would prove to be a perfect fit in a country that valued mobility. And while the series typically has its roots on home consoles, there's something about a Monster Hunter game being on a portable gaming system that just feels right. At the same time, Monster Hunter Rise represents a significant thematic and technical change for the franchise, thanks to a story based heavily on Japanese lore, new mechanics, and a horde mode that makes the game feel quite unique compared to past titles. The fact that Capcom managed to squeeze out this much performance out of the Switch is also quite surprising and certainly bodes well for future iterations of the series on portables. If you can say one thing about Monster Hunter Rise, it's that the Switch exclusive is definitely a modern Monster Hunter game, complete with all the benefits and trapping that entails. You start out this time around in Kamura Village, a serene-looking settlement that has an unmistakably Japanese vibe to its design. While Yukumo Village in Monster Hunter Portable 3rd had a similar feel to it, Kamura takes the Japanese theme even further, not just with the design of the village and its people, but its story as well. See, beneath the peaceful exterior of Kamura lies a troubling and violent history known as the Rampage. This event is marked by the appearance of a horde of monsters that suddenly swarm the village, leaving a wake of death and destruction in its path. Eagle-eyed aficionados of Japanese culture will notice that the theme behind the Rampage bears similarities to the Hyakiyako, or Night Parade of 100 Demons. This supernatural occurrence from Japanese folklore typically involves a large number of creatures, such as Oni or Yokai, taking part in a swarm of monsters under the direction of one powerful demon. The Rampage adds a new twist on the gameplay that can be quite fun, especially in a group. Siege fighting is honestly something that has been hit or miss in the history of the series, and Rampage mode fortunately falls under the hit category, at least for the most part. The mode requires some strategic thinking in terms of what weapons to install, when to use heavy hitters such as Dragonators, splitting Wyvern shots, and powerful villagers such as Fugen and Utsushi, as well as which monsters to target first to prevent your defenses from being overrun. That being said, it's not perfect. Folks who don't like tower defense games and want to just focus on hunting, for example, might not appreciate its inclusion, especially during times when you're required to clear a Rampage skirmish to progress the story and find yourself stuck against a powerful Apex monster. Tickets from the Rampage are also important for some types of crafting, so it's something that you just can't simply ignore. The mode can be especially overwhelming when playing solo, as you're in charge of setting up your installations, while also being responsible for shooting down flying monsters and knocking down these specialized gate crashers that can destroy your defenses pretty quickly. This is on top of worrying about regular monsters that constantly press their attack. However, things improve drastically with the addition of even just one extra player. By splitting roles and having one player man the ballistas and another fight monsters straight up, for example, Rampage mode becomes a more enjoyable and manageable affair. Some of the new monsters especially add an extra Japanese flavor to the mix. While you have series staples like Rathian and Rathalos, you also have creatures that are inspired by Japanese ghost stories, like the hatchet-wielding Gos Harag and the almost Sadako-like Somnacanth, who looks like it just crawled straight out from a well. The theme is also carried onto the game's overall motive, from the use of Japanese brush art for illustrations, as well as the grainy movie-style intros for monsters that come with old-fashioned lute and song. Rise goes all in with the traditional vibe. Even the background music in the village and gathering hub sang by Shrine Maiden twins Hinoa and Minoto have a sweet and at times haunting traditional quality to it, which further lends to the game's Japanese flavor. It's a testament to the great job that Capcom did when it comes to the game's production values, which are top-notch. I mean, sometimes I find myself having a hard time believing that this is actually a Switch game. With the exception of developers such as Nintendo, many games for the portable console typically feature graphics that decidedly look previous gen, something that makes me appreciate Rise's stellar visuals and production even more. It shows that the game was not designed as an afterthought, while the main Monster Hunter team works on the console follow-up to whatever comes after the popular world in Iceborne. Monster Hunter Rise also has a more coherent feel to its story, something that the series is admittedly not known for. World in Iceborne tried to serve up a more fleshed out narrative, but it still wasn't a strong point in the grand scheme of things. For its part, Monster Hunter Rise is a tad better story-wise, especially when factoring in the roles of the Wyverian sisters, which can be eerily fascinating at times. However, it still suffers from the same narrative hiccups of past games in the series, particularly their tendency to play up serious moments that ultimately don't lead to much of anything as soon as you return to the village and find things to be pretty much the same as they were. Then again, storytelling isn't exactly Monster Hunter's forte. Instead, the franchise's gameplay has always been its calling card, and Monster Hunter Rise is no different in that regard. Now, when Capcom first revealed plans for a new Monster Hunter on Switch, there was a question whether it would be more like the old games like Generations Ultimate, or based on the new standards hit by World and Iceborne. Part of the reason comes from the notion that the Switch was underpowered compared to other home consoles, making it impossible to create a game with Iceborne's mechanical depth and sprawling maps. Boy, was that notion wrong! Rise's maps feel even bigger than World and Iceborne overall, so much so that getting from one end to the other on foot can take quite some time. Fortunately, you now get help in the form of new animal buddies known as Palamutes, which are dogs that you can mount and fight together with during the course of your hunts. When combined with subcamps that can be unlocked, these canine companions make navigating Rise's large maps a cinch while adding yet another support option to cats. Palamutes also provide a great quality of life addition during battles. A good example is the ability to sharpen while mounted. This allows players to safely restore weapon sharpness even in the presence of a monster, which is great given how Rise continues the new standard set in World where you're not able to catch your breath or safely disengage from a monster by mapping out. Having a cat and dog helper especially makes solo hunts more enjoyable, as you can be accompanied by one of each at the same time. Cats are especially good with healing and seem to know just when to pop up a healing song or plant a healing flower when needed. There are times, however, when it feels like the game forces you to explore its sprawling maps. Unlike past games, for example, maxing out your health and stamina bar for each hunt can't be achieved by simply eating food at the canteen. In addition to having a pre-hunt meal, you will also need to track down endemic life known as spirit bugs in the course of the hunt in order to optimize your stats. It's not a deal breaker, as you can at least max out your life bar in just a few minutes once you familiarize yourself with the locations of the green spirit bugs for each map. However, it can still feel like busy work if you simply want to focus on hunting. The increased emphasis on interacting with the ecosystem, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, mind you, is also contradicted by the fact that the hunter timer has not increased, leading to a more rushed feeling as opposed to being able to fully enjoy the environment. One nice change is the addition of a new feature called the Wirebug, which provides an extra dose of mobility that makes Monster Hunter Rise play fast compared to previous games. In addition to letting you reach high places, Wirebugs also allow you to do quick evasions in a pinch, which is especially a godsend when using some of the game's slower weapons. Wirebugs are also tied to Rise's new switch skills, which pays homage to the older Hunter Art skills from Generations Ultimate. Once you reach a certain point in the game, you earn access to new skills which you can swap in order to match your playstyle. For certain weapons, switch skills are a bona fide game changer. One skill, for example, changes the Greatsword's regular shoulder tackle to a guard tackle, which gives you a much bigger window to counter enemy moves. The other turns the True Charge Slash into the Rage Slash, which does less damage, but gives you super armor during the final charge of your Greatsword, as well as the ability to freely change the direction you're aiming at. This allows you to tank hits without losing your charge and also miss less. When used together, both skills lead to a fun and more aggressive way to play Greatsword, where you can stand toe-to-toe with any enemy while constantly countering and tanking enemy attacks. Just make sure to watch your health bar as you still take damage when using Rage Slash. One skill turns the lance into an actual tank by drawing a monster's aggro, allowing teammates to attack more safely. Even the Insect Glaive's Recall Kinsect skill, which was much maligned when it was first shown, can be incredibly useful for folks who like to spam bug attacks, which can be a hilariously safe way to deal with some of the game's toughest monsters, especially when playing solo. The game's mounting mechanic also gets a major overhaul with the introduction of Wyvern Riding, or that Wyvern Riding. This allows you to fulfill your Monster Hunter story's dream of riding an actual monster in the mainline game, and can also be used to topple the monster you're riding or inflict damage on another monster that you're fighting. In what appears to be a response to mounting abuse in World and Iceborne, mounts are a lot more challenging to trigger through regular aerial attacks, while monster takedowns seem to last for a shorter amount of time. One downside is that it diminishes one of the advantages of the Insect Glaive, as you mostly have to rely on turf wars between monsters to get multiple mounts in one hunt. It also makes dung bombs less useful, as you typically want monsters to encounter each other to increase your chances for triggering a Wyvern Ride. All in all though, the new additions also make Rise the most beginner-friendly game in the series to date. Old Monster Hunter games can be notoriously hard to get into, and the control and quality of life changes introduced by World made a huge difference in making it less cumbersome to play while still providing a challenge. Rise adds even more improvements to that and makes it feel great and more intuitive to play. Even the addition of spoken voice lines to hunters can be helpful to new players, as your character will warn you when a monster is setting up to unleash its more dangerous attacks. Add the game's excellent hitboxes, which are as good as I've seen in the series and allow for some pretty tight and epic evasions, and hunting feels quite good overall in Rise. One potential gripe with the controls, however, is the inability to fully customize button mapping. Rise, for example, made the left trigger button primarily a wire bug button. This makes it tough when you've used weapons such as Insect Glaive for a long time and find yourself instinctively pressing the left trigger to send out your bug, but end up doing a wire bug move instead. Purists might also decry some of the changes that were made to the game. Hot drinks and cool drinks, for example, have been taken out, allowing you to hunt in hot and cold areas without them. While some players will welcome this, as it allows them to focus on hunting, others might think that it makes Rise easier and feel like less of a Monster Hunter game. Overall, however, the quality of life changes are much appreciated. These include the ability to now craft decorations for adding skills to your build, as opposed to randomly acquiring them from hunts. You still need to grind materials for them, but it at least removes a chance-based element from farming and putting together optimal sets. Chance is still a factor when melding skill talismans, however, which only give you a certain percentage to successfully create the one with the skills that you want. On that note, make sure to give players that you team up with a like after each hunt, which hopefully will make them give you a like as well in order to get those friendship tickets, which can serve as material for your melding needs. The game also felt short, which is strange to say after putting in nearly 200 hours on it. The campaign just wrapped up a bit too quickly, while the stable of monsters could be admittedly higher. This will undoubtedly be addressed through free updates, as well as the eventual Master Rank expansion, which has not been announced but is pretty much a given based on the franchise's track record. On the plus side, it can be said that the real game starts after you finish the campaign, so expect to spend a ton of time on endgame content while you build and optimize your hunting sets. So what are my final thoughts on Monster Hunter Rise? Well, Capcom could have easily just mailed it in when it came to creating a new Monster Hunter game for the Switch. Monster Hunter Rise, however, goes above and beyond expectations by serving up a visual and technical masterpiece on Nintendo's hybrid portable console. Rise builds on the new gameplay foundation introduced by Monster Hunter World, while adding even more features and quality of life improvements. My only wish is that the game just had a bit more content, because what it did have is something I truly enjoyed. As always, feel free to leave any thoughts or questions you may have in the comment section. Once again, this is Tabi Asobi, and thank you for watching.